My name is Rubby, a single 26-year-old woman without a steady job. Since middle school, I've mostly kept to myself. Although I attended high school, I didn't complete it, so my highest education is from middle school. Since then, I've lived with my parents, taking on part-time work and finding occasional gigs through online listings. My older brother, James, is 3 years my senior. He's the total opposite of me, athletic, sociable, and extroverted. James has always distanced himself from me, even going so far as to ignore me if we crossed paths in public. For instance, if we happened to meet at a convenience store, he'd act as though I didn't exist. He never brought friends over, and it seemed he was embarrassed to acknowledge me as his sister. I accepted this dynamic, chalking it up to his own issues. Once he left for college, I let it go entirely. Then came the news that James was getting married. At 29, it wasn't unexpected, but it became official when he announced he would be bringing his fiancée over to meet our parents. Since I was home at the time, I decided to be part of the gathering. "Mom, Dad, I'm here," I called out as James arrived. When he saw me with our parents, he looked momentarily surprised. "Thank you for letting me visit," his fiancée said politely as she entered, unaware of James's usual attitude towards me. When her eyes fell on me, she looked puzzled, as if silently asking James, "Who's this?" It was obvious he hadn't mentioned me to her. My mom introduced herself and my father to the fiancé, saying, "Welcome, I'm James's mother, and this is his father." However, she didn't acknowledge me at all. The fiancé, seemingly content with this brief introduction, returned the greeting but still seemed curious about who I was. My father, likewise, said nothing to introduce me. My parents have always favored James due to his accomplishments, while they were critical of me, often saying things like, "Why can't you be more like your brother?" Over time, these remarks became more severe. They eventually went as far as to call me a freeloader in their frustrations. This family meeting was no different. It was clear they intended to ignore me. As my mother got up to bring more drinks, she whispered, "Why are you here? Go back to your room." I had wanted to be part of the family's life, but this attempt only seemed to irritate them. Despite this, I stayed seated, unwilling to retreat. James's fiancée, who introduced herself as Emma, was my age, 26, but carried a beauty and elegance that made her seem out of reach. My brother seemed frustrated with my presence and didn't even introduce me to her. Once the formalities of their engagement were settled, casual conversation started, but James continued to ignore me. Then he turned to Emma, asking, "What do you usually do, Ruby?" Before I could answer, my brother quickly interrupted, "Emma, you don't need to engage with her." Emma looked slightly shocked. "That's right, don't worry about it," my mother added dismissively. "Yes, don't bother," my father echoed. "She's nothing more than a stranger with a bit of blood relation." Hearing myself reduced to a stranger extinguished my hope for a better relationship. I realized the divide was too deep. The meeting concluded, leaving me feeling like I was invisible. Not long after, James and Emma were married and began constructing a new home. James, who worked at a reputable company, had a strong income, even at his young age. Emma had quit her job and was preparing to be a stay-at-home wife. When their home was finally ready, they sent out invitations for a housewarming, including Emma's relatives and a few of James's bosses. My mom was thrilled, saying, "Wow, it's finished. We'll need to find a housewarming gift. What should we bring?" My dad replied, "We're family, so nothing too grand." While scanning the invitation, only my parents' names were listed. I wasn't included. When my mom noticed, she said, "Isn't Ruby coming too?" I was surprised, considering they'd dismissed me so readily before. "It's fine, I don't need to be there," I told her, but she insisted, "No, you're coming, I'll sort it out." So, I went along. On the day of the party, it unexpectedly started to rain. My parents and I took a taxi to James's house, where, due to the downpour, James and Emma greeted guests at the entrance rather than the front yard. As we arrived, my mom asked me to cover the taxi fare, then quickly exited the vehicle with my dad, rushing to the door without umbrellas and leaving me to handle the fare. After paying, I hurried to the entrance, where Emma met me with a blank look. "Who are you?" she asked, as if we were strangers. I reintroduced myself. "I'm Ruby, James's sister." Her expression turned amused, and she said with a smile, "Oh, the dropout? The parasite?" Her words stung, though she delivered them casually, almost sweetly. Just then, James returned from greeting other guests, and when he saw me, he scowled. "What are you doing here?" he asked disdainfully. "I told you not to invite her," Why is she here? My brother snapped as soon as he saw me. I don't know, Emma replied, visibly annoyed. I realized he truly hadn't wanted me there, and Emma's attitude shifted once she understood who I was. In fact, she seemed worse than my parents and brother combined. Would you have preferred if I hadn't come? I asked cautiously. Yes, my brother sneered. You're a stranger due to your lack of education, he added. Dropping out of high school doesn't even count as schooling, does it? Emma nodded in agreement, saying coldly, could you leave the property now? Her calm expression only made her words more unsettling. Got it. I turned and left without another word. The taxi that had brought us was gone, and since it wasn't a busy area, finding another would be tough. I had no umbrella, so I walked, rain drenching me. Behind me, I could hear Emma laughing. When I arrived home, my parents had already returned and seemed to be in high spirits. They saw me and asked, why did you leave so quickly? Couldn't you at least get a taxi? You're so useless, my mother muttered as if it were simply a fact. Sorry, I felt sick. I lied to avoid more confrontation. For something so trivial, you left? You're hopeless. Make sure you still give them the gift later. You're an adult, my father added. I'd prepared a gift, but had left with it since I hadn't had a chance to give it. I thought about mailing it but didn't know their address. When I considered asking my parents for it, the atmosphere was so tense that I decided to contact my brother directly instead. I messaged him, I'd like to send a gift, could you give me the address? All I received was, I don't share my address with strangers. I sighed. Was it genuinely amusing for him to belittle me, even in private? Maybe Emma was typing while laughing beside him. Either way, it was ridiculous. I gave up on sending the gift and instead decided to move out. I saw no future with my family and chose to be independent. Though I didn't have a full-time job, I'd saved enough from part-time work to afford a small place. To make ends meet, I turned to streaming videos, something I'd been interested in for a while and already had a knack for. As I started, my audience grew, and before long, I was earning tens of thousands a month, more than enough to support myself. I invested any surplus money, and these investments thrived. Eventually, I started a small business importing and selling goods. My days were filled with purpose, and for once, I felt free from any family's disapproval. Months later, I received a call from my parents, who hadn't spoken to me since I left. We need your help with James, they said. Why? I asked, genuinely curious about why my brother would need my support. They hesitated before explaining. After moving into his new house, my brother began hosting parties with various guests, bosses, executives, and Emma's friends. At one of these gatherings, someone suggested a lucrative investment, and my brother bought into it. The promise of huge returns blinded him, and he ended up squandering a massive amount. I was stunned. He had a well-paying job. Had he simply stuck to work, he wouldn't have made such a mistake. Who recommended this investment? I asked. Oh, it's one of Emma's friends, my parents replied confidently, trusting Emma implicitly. How much does he need? I asked, wondering just how bad things were. The amount they mentioned was enormous, far beyond what an ordinary salary could cover. Is he truly that desperate? I asked, sensing there was more to the story. My parents hesitated and then confessed. We got involved in the investment too. I don't have that kind of money to spare. I'm sorry, I said, hoping to end the conversation. They begged, we're your family. You should help us in a time like this. Family? Isn't it a bit late for that? I'm sorry, but I'm busy, and remember, I'm only a stranger to you. With that, I ended the call. Soon after, my parents, brother, and even Emma found out where I worked and came to my office. I was in a meeting when my secretary informed me, some guests are here for you, President. I didn't have any other appointments. Who are they? I asked, feeling an uneasy chill. I apologized to my business partner, excused myself, and went to the reception area, where I saw Emma, now visibly pregnant, my brother, and my parents. So, you're running a business now? Well, it's not as big as where I work, my brother scoffed, looking around with disdain. Do I know you? I asked, pretending they were strangers. What's with the attitude? My brother shouted angrily. My mother stepped in and said, we've already talked about this. We need your help. You run a company, so you can support us, can't you? My mother shamelessly pleaded for money, as if it were my duty to shoulder everyone else's burdens. Emma's about to give birth, and the baby isn't developing well. We need a good doctor. Please, Ruby, she begged. My father and Emma chimed in, acting as though paying off their debts was simply my responsibility. As employees passed by, They glanced over, clearly concerned by the commotion. Annoyed, I said firmly, "Please leave, you're causing a disturbance." "A disturbance?" my brother shouted, his anger building. "We came all this way, and that's how you talk to family?" His voice rose, drawing even more attention. Turning to the gathering staff, my brother sneered, "Did you all know this girl dropped out of middle school? She was a NEET, a shut-in." He expected the revelation to embarrass me, but the staff's response surprised him. "Yes, we know," one employee replied calmly. "The president is open about her past and even hires others from similar backgrounds. Is there a problem with that?" My brother, used to an environment filled with elite connections, was momentarily speechless. Sensing his discomfort, my father jumped in, scoffing, "What a sad excuse for a company, just a gathering of NEETs." My brother took it further, loudly declaring, "And any company that would work with a place like this must be a joke." Just then, the president of the client company I had been meeting with emerged from the reception area. Likely having heard the commotion, my brother's face turned pale, and he quickly looked away. "James, isn't it?" the president asked, recognizing him. "You're the one constantly filing reports late, the division manager, right? Your company sure owes us a lot," he remarked coolly. My brother turned beet red, visibly sweating. "My apologies for the scene," I said to the president. "I'll handle it." "Oh, take your time," he replied, amused. "I can wait. Family is important." I turned to my family and said firmly, "They're not my family, they're complete strangers." Stunned, my parents, brother, and Emma were escorted out of the building without further resistance, likely too shocked to put up a fight. After they left, I investigated how they'd learned about my success. Apparently, Emma's friend had spotted a feature on a young woman making waves as a trader and business owner and had been shocked to discover it was me, her husband's useless sister. Emma had convinced my family to approach me for help. When I didn't return their calls, they decided to show up in person. Out of curiosity, I dug a bit further into Emma's background. I discovered that her friend was her ex-boyfriend, and, shockingly, he was the father of her child, not my brother. The truth unraveled further. Emma and her ex-boyfriend had schemed together, taking money from my brother and others under the guise of investments. With mounting evidence, Emma and her ex were eventually arrested. Unfortunately, the money my family lost in their scheme wouldn't be returned anytime soon. The fallout didn't stop there. After the incident, my brother's reputation at his company crumbled, and he was demoted to a low-ranking position. He resigned soon after. Meanwhile, my father's behavior at his workplace also came under scrutiny. Known for belittling others, he was fired following an investigation that revealed a pattern of abusive behavior, especially toward employees without a certain level of education. Now, both my father and brother are unemployed, with their finances dwindling. They've attempted to reach out to me, asking to reconcile and live together as a family, but I banned them from entering my company's premises, so they can no longer ambush me. Despite their claims that we're still family, my response is always the same: "I don't know you. You're strangers to me." I have no intention of changing my answer, ever.